In this video, we are going to talk about the basics of cryptography. The first part is encryption. So encryption is a technology that you deal every day. The moment you start using your computer or you visit a website, there is an encryption, and this is how your data protected when it pass over the internet. So it will be interesting. Let's see the topics that you are going to learn in this video. What is encryption, how it works, and the type of encryption, and how this type of encryption works and how it is different each other. Internet is full of connected network devices. When you send a plain text message to one of your friend in the other part of the country or in different country, that's going to go through many connected devices network, and finally it reaches to your receiver. And that is not a one-to-one connection, right? It is in an internet. You send your information to your internet service provider, and it's gonna go through many network devices. And the same network is connected with good and bad people also. So if you send your message as a plain text, what if someone intercept or tap your information? They can simply read it because you are sending it as a plain text where anybody can read the information. So sending plain text information, so sending a plain text message over internet, over the network where the other people are connected to, is not a good choice. Here it comes the importance of encryption. With encryption, you can convert a data into a non-readable format so that only the authorized party can understand the information. Here two people are communicating, Bob and Alice communicating. So Alice is the only authorized person who's supposed to read the message sent by Bob. And Bob is sending a message, hello, my message. So this message have to send over the internet to Alice. So this message first converted into a non-readable format using a key. A key, you can call it as a password or a key, but key is a common term that used in encryption. So using a key, this message, the plain text message, converted into a non-readable format, and this non-readable data is known as ciphertext. Then the ciphertext sent over the internet. So if someone try to tap your information from the internet, it is still protected because it is non-readable, and only the people who have the key can read the information. So if someone get your data, it is not going to be a useful data. So this data sent over the internet, and finally it reached to the Alice device. Once it reached to the Alice device, this ciphertext get decrypted using the key. So the process of converting a non-readable data, that is ciphertext, into a readable format using the key is known as decryption. So this way the data sent over the network are protected, and also it is going to be a non-readable data if this goes into wrong hands. Now let's go for an example. I'm using an online tool to show you how encryption and decryption works. So I have a message. So hello, my message. This is what I want to encrypt. I just click on the encryption. So using a key, this message got encrypted. And if I send this over the internet, without knowing my key, no one can convert this message into this readable format. Now I copy this message. For example, this reached to the destination, let's say, as an encrypted text. Now at the reception end, they can simply decrypt the message and they can read this message. So this is how the process. Your message got encrypted and converted into a non-readable format. Once it reached the destination, they can decrypt this message using the key and read the message. There are two types of encryption. Symmetric encryption is what we are going to discuss in this slide. In a symmetric encryption, as it named symmetric, it uses one key for the encryption and decryption. So it uses same key for the encryption and decryption. So look at the picture. We have a message sending to the Alice, and in this message the encryption is done using a mathematical process, an algorithm, and a key, that is key 1. the same key gonna use for the decryption at the recipient side also. So the message get converted into a non-readable format, that is ciphertext, using a key, and the same key gonna use for the decryption also. So this method using same key for encryption and decryption is known as symmetric encryption. In this method, if you send the message, encrypted message, that is ciphertext, and also the key over the internet, then there is a chance to get the key leaked into someone's hand and he can read or decrypt the message, right? So you need a more secure mechanism to transmit the key from the sender side to the recipient side. Let's try an example using an online tool to understand how symmetric encryption works. So this is my message I want to encrypt, and I'm gonna use a key. Then I encrypt the message. So you can see that this is the ciphertext I got. Now this I send to the recipient side, and once the recipient receive this ciphertext, they can decrypt using the same key that I use for the encryption. By this way, the recipient can read the message. So the only important thing in this method is sending the key that you use for encryption in a secure way to the recipient side. The second type of encryption that we are going to discuss is asymmetric encryption. And this is also known as public key cryptography because it uses a pair of related keys, and one key is known as public key and another key is known as private key. And it uses these keys to decrypt and encrypt a message. For example, Bob wants to send a message to Alice. So Bob's system generates a key pair and that keys relate each other. And Bob use one of the key to encrypt the message, then he get the ciphertext, right? And this ciphertext gonna send over the internet to the Alice device. Once Alice receive this message, Alice gonna use the second part of the key. So Bob use part 1 of the key, for example, then Alice gonna use part 2 of the key. And this message decrypt using the part 2 of the key, and she get the plain text message. So the key which we shared over the network to the recipient is known as public key, and the other part of the key is known as private key. So in an asymmetric encryption, a private key can be used to encrypt the message and the public key can be used to decrypt the message. Or a public key can be used to encrypt the message and a private key can be used to decrypt the message. So you cannot encrypt and decrypt a message using the same key, for example, public key, or using the same private key. You cannot encrypt and decrypt. You have to use one for the encryption, then the other for the decryption. There is no restriction that the private key can be only used for encryption and public key can be only used for decryption. If you encrypt a message with one of the key pair, then the other part of the key in the same pair can be used to decrypt the message. For a better understanding, let's go with an example using an online tool. So here you can see that I have to generate a key pair first, and that include a public key and a private key. So now I'm going to show you how the asymmetric encryption works with these keys. So I copy the private key and I gave the private key here, and I'm going to enter my message that I want to encrypt. Then I click on the encrypt, so I get the ciphertext. Now I will copy this ciphertext and paste here in the decryption column. So here I use private key, so I'm gonna use public key in order to decrypt this message. I enter the public key and I select the key type public, then decrypt. So I get my decrypted message. So if you look at the process, we generated a key pair, that is a private key and public key. This key mathematically relate each other, and I enter my message. I encrypted this message with the private key and I got the ciphertext. Now at the recipient side, the ciphertext gonna decrypt using the public key and get the message back to the readable format. So if you use a public key here, then you have to use a private key for the decryption. If you use a private key for the encryption, then you have to use a public key for the decryption. A good understanding on asymmetric encryption is very important when you learn about the public key infrastructure. So I would like to take another example to make sure that you are clear about how this symmetric encryption works. So think about Alice and Bob again want to communicate. So the first thing that Alice device does is it generate a key pair, and that include a public key and a private key. Then Alice gonna send the public key to Bob over the internet, and still Alice private key remains in Alice device only. Once Bob got this public key, then Bob create his message, then encrypted it using the public key, and he got the ciphertext. Then this ciphertext gonna send over the internet to Alice system. Once Alice received the ciphertext, Alice can decrypt this using the private key, and she get the plain text. So if you look at this method, the public key that is shared by Alice to the Bob is used for the encryption, and in this way only the people who hold the private key of this key pair can decrypt this message. In this case, Alice system stored this private key in a way that no one can read this private key. So it is securely stored, and Alice only shared the public key. So whenever Alice want a confidential communication, Alice gonna share the public key to the other party, and they encrypt their message using the public key and send it over the internet. As Alice have a private key which always remain in her system, this private key gonna use to decrypt the message, and this message get into readable format. So this is how the asymmetric encryption work in the internet. First, in an asymmetric encryption, they share the public key with the party they want to make a confidential or an encrypted communication. Then the party wants to receive this public key, they start encrypting this message using the public key and send the message over the internet. As the Alice is the only one holding the private key, she is the only one in the world can decrypt the message. It's good to read about the differences between the symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. I will go through some of the important points that you need to know. A symmetric encryption involves less mathematical process compared to asymmetric encryption, so that the asymmetric encryption adds more overhead on the CPU and memory if you compare the processing between the symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. So because of this, the symmetric encryption is used to transmit big data, and asymmetric encryptions are used to transmit small data. Then key length of an asymmetric encryption is 128 or 256 bit key size are used. In an asymmetric encryption, 2048 RSA key bit or much higher key bits are also used where we need more security. Asymmetric encryptions are known as much safer compared to the symmetric encryption, because in an asymmetric encryption you share only one key over the to the public, but at the same time in a symmetric encryption it uses one key for the encryption and decryption, so it is considered as less secure compared to asymmetric encryption. And as I told, it uses only less resources compared to asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption use less resources compared to asymmetric encryption, and the symmetric encryption is fast if you compare with the asymmetric encryption. Asymmetric encryption is slower in terms of its speed if we compare with the symmetric encryption. And following are the algorithms that these are the mathematical procedures or algorithms that are available in order to do symmetric and asymmetric encryption. I recommend you to visit this site and read, so that you will understand about the differences between the symmetric and asymmetric encryption. So we learned about two encryption technology, that is symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. In a symmetric encryption, as it uses the same key and the mathematical process is lesser, the encryption speed is high compared to the asymmetric encryption. But if you look at the asymmetric encryption, it is more stronger, more safer, but the problem here is asymmetric encryption is slow compared to symmetric encryption. So we need to combine the advantage of these two type of encryption so that we have security and speed and performance. So again, come back to the example, Alice and Bob into the picture. Now Alice generated a key pair and Alice sent the public key to Bob. So here the plan of Alice and Bob is they want to send a huge data. So using asymmetric encryption to send this huge data is not practical, as I told. The speed compared to symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption is less. So here the plan is to initiate the communication using asymmetric encryption, then continue the big data transfer using symmetric encryption. And this is how exactly the VPNs work. So let's come back to the picture. Alice generated a key pair and sent the public key to Bob. So Bob gonna encrypt the key that they are going to use for the symmetric encryption. So now the communication channel is asymmetric encryption. The intention of this first step is to share the secret that they are going to use in the symmetric encryption. So Bob gonna encrypt the symmetric key for encryption with the public key, then send it to the Alice. Alice is the only one holding the other part of the key pair, that is a private key, and that gonna use for the decryption. Now Bob and Alice have a secret, a key that's shared over the network in a very secure way, that is asymmetric encryption. So in the next step, they're going to switch the communication to symmetric encryption, and as they have a key shared securely, they're going to use the symmetric key, the same key for encryption and decryption, and this moment they can start the bulk data transfer. So this is how the VPNs are working actually. They share the secret over the internet using the symmetric encryption in the first step. Once this handshake happen, then they're gonna switch to the symmetric encryption, and in the symmetric encryption they use same key to transfer the bulk data, so that VPN adds security at the same time also the performance. And this is what combining this encryption, this is how we take the advantage of symmetric encryption and asymmetric encryption. So let us summarize what we have learned in this video. We talked about encryption, types of encryption. We went through the demos of each of the encryption type, and also we saw how the encryption methods are combined and we take advantage of the security, performance and speed. So that is all. See you in the next video.